Let me give you an argument that we have never seen in a courtroom. Ask yourself why. In this case, we raise a critical issue regarding the jurisdictional authority of government agencies, specifically in the context of child support enforcement programs. We contend that these agencies have overstepped their boundaries, leading to fundamental errors in jurisdiction. Furthermore, we argue that this overreach infringes upon the principles of the separation of powers doctrine, a foundational concept in our system of government. Jurisdictional overreach. Lawyer would argue that government child support agencies have acted beyond their rightful jurisdiction. This involves instances where agencies have assumed powers or responsibilities that should be reserved for other branches of government or entities. They would present specific examples or cases where such overreach has occurred, emphasizing that it results in errors and legal disputes such as Case 1, Administrative Determinations of Legal Paternity. The lawyer would cite a case where a government child support agency made determinations of legal paternity without proper legal proceedings. They would emphasize how this overreach led to legal disputes regarding the accuracy of paternity claims. Case 2, Administrative Setting of Child Support Obligations. The lawyer would describe a scenario where the agency, in an administrative capacity, set child support obligations without the involvement of the judiciary. They would point out that such actions result in disputes over the fairness and accuracy of the calculations. Case 3, Enforcement Actions Without Judicial Oversight. The lawyer would discuss instances where government agencies initiated enforcement actions, such as wage garnishment or asset seizure, without obtaining judicial orders. They would highlight how this bypassing of the judicial branch's oversight leads to legal disputes over due process and constitutional rights. Case 4, Determinations of Custody and Visitation Rights. In situations where government agencies make determinations regarding custody and visitation rights, the lawyer would present a case where such determinations were challenged in court. They would argue that these agencies do not have the authority to make legal determinations in such sensitive matters. After presenting each case, the lawyer would emphasize the errors and legal disputes that arose due to these instances of jurisdictional overreach. They would highlight how parties involved in these cases experienced confusion, frustration, and violations of their legal rights. The lawyer would argue that these examples underscore the need to clarify the roles and responsibilities of government child support agencies to prevent such errors and disputes from recurring. By providing concrete examples of jurisdictional overreach and the resulting legal issues, the lawyer would aim to demonstrate that these are not isolated incidents, but rather a systemic problem that calls for legal reforms and a clearer delineation of powers within the child support enforcement system. Separation of powers doctrine. The lawyer would explain the separation of powers doctrine, a fundamental principle in constitutional law, which divides the powers of government into three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. They would contend that government child support agencies, by exerting authority that is more akin to the judicial branch, such as making legal determinations or enforcing court orders, are overstepping the separation of powers. Lack of proper adjudication. The lawyer would argue that these agencies lack the necessary mechanisms for proper adjudication of legal matters related to child support, including the determination of parental obligations. They would contend that these issues are to be handled by the judiciary, where due process rights are protected and legal expertise is present. Impact on due process. The lawyer would assert that this jurisdictional overreach leads to due process violations, as parties involved don't receive a fair and impartial hearing and don't have access to the legal safeguards provided by the judicial system. Call for legal reforms. The lawyer would insist that the system needs legal reforms to clarify the roles and limits of government child support agencies, booting their functions out the fucking park with their intended administrative responsibilities. In their closing argument, the lawyer would summarize the shitfuckery and emphasize the importance of agencies keeping their dim-witted eyes on the separation of powers doctrine and maintaining proper Jurisdictional boundaries. Ladies and gentlemen, we have presented a case highlighting the fundamental errors of jurisdiction within government child support agencies. It is our belief that this overreach not only leads to legal disputes and due process violations, but also threatens the foundational principles of our democracy, including the separation of powers doctrine. We urge you to consider the profound implications of these jurisdictional errors and to support legal reforms that restore the integrity of our system. And anyone who can't see the truth in that can eat a bowl of dicks, as in the whole bowl of dicks.